Bon Vivant's Vichyssoise. On July 2nd, 1971, in Westchester County, New York, a married couple named Samuel and Grace Cochran decided it was too hot to cook, so they opened a can of Vichyssoise, a chilled potato, and leek soup made by a company called Bon Vivant. It tasted off, so they barely finished it. Within hours, Samuel lost the ability to move his arms and legs and died that night. The next morning, Grace was admitted to the hospital with total paralysis. Both were diagnosed with botulism, a toxin so potent that a few micrograms can kill an adult. The FDA traced the can back to a batch of 6,444 units and issued a recall. But when investigators inspected Bon Vivant's Newark, New Jersey plant, they found the soup hadn't been heated enough during canning to kill the bacteria, and the company's record keeping was such a mess that nobody could tell which batches were safe. With no way to isolate the problem, the FDA seized every single Bon Vivant product in the country, more than 1 million cans. A company that had been in business since 1863, 108 years, collapsed within weeks. It filed for bankruptcy that same month, and by 1974, it was gone for good. One tainted can had ended a business older than the telephone, Jack in the Box. In January 1993, hospitals across Washington state began admitting a strange wave of young children with bloody diarrhea and a terrifying complication called hemolytic uremic syndrome, which shuts down the kidneys. Investigators traced it to undercooked hamburger patties served at Jack in the Box, contaminated with E. coli 0157:H7. The outbreak eventually spread to 73 restaurants across 4 states, sickening more than 700 people, most of them children under 10. 4 of them died, including 17-month-old Riley Detweiler, who had never even eaten a hamburger himself but caught it from another infected child at daycare. The investigation revealed that Jack in the Box had known Washington law required burgers to be cooked to 155 degrees Fahrenheit, but the company had been following the lower federal guideline of 140 instead, not hot enough to kill the bacteria. The outbreak became a defining moment in American food policy. The USDA declared E. coli 0157:H7 an illegal adulterant in ground beef regardless of quantity. Mandatory food safety inspection systems were rolled out nationwide, and cooking temperature standards were raised for good. Jack in the Box alone lost more than $160 million in the year and a half that followed. The Peanut Corporation of America. Between 2008 and 2009, a wave of salmonella poisoning swept across 46 states, eventually linked to peanut butter and peanut paste produced at a single plant in Blakely, Georgia, owned by the Peanut Corporation of America. 9 people died and more than 700 fell seriously ill, but what made this outbreak different wasn't the scale, it was the paper trail. Internal emails later presented in court showed that company president Stuart Parnell had been told repeatedly that his products were testing positive for salmonella, and instead of pulling them, he wrote back telling employees to ship them anyway, at one point complaining that delays over lab results were, in his words, costing the company money. Investigators who inspected the plant found a leaking roof, cockroaches, and evidence of rodents, the exact conditions that breed salmonella in the first place. When the outbreak finally became public, the company shut down and filed for bankruptcy within days. But the story didn't end there. In 2015, Parnell was convicted on more than 60 federal counts and sentenced to 28 years in prison, the harshest sentence ever handed down in a foodborne illness case in American history. His brother received 20 years. It was the first time a food executive in the U.S. had ever been sent to prison for knowingly shipping tainted food. Jensen Farms. In the late summer of 2011, health officials began noticing an unusual spike in listeria infections concentrated in Colorado. The source was traced to whole cantaloupes grown at Jensen Farms, a family-run operation that had recently installed new washing equipment, machinery that had actually been built for cleaning potatoes and was nearly impossible to properly sanitize. Investigators found the equipment corroded, standing water pulled across the packing floor, and no chlorine spray in use, despite the farm being aware it should have had one. The cantaloupes went out to 28 states before anyone knew something was wrong. By the time the outbreak was declared over, 147 people had been infected and 33 had died, making it the deadliest foodborne illness outbreak in the United States since the CDC began tracking outbreaks in the 1970s. Victims included a 92-year-old World War II veteran who spent his final months in a hospital bed instead of at home. The farm's owners, brothers Eric and Ryan Jensen, were criminally charged for introducing adulterated food into interstate commerce, and the company collapsed into bankruptcy almost immediately. The Chinese milk scandal. In December 2007, a Chinese dairy company called Sanlu Group began quietly receiving complaints from parents about their babies developing kidney stones after drinking its infant formula. Instead of investigating and pulling the product, the company sat on the information for months, reportedly under pressure from local officials who didn't want the story breaking right before the 2008 Beijing Olympics. The cause turned out to be melamine, an industrial chemical normally used in plastics, deliberately added to watered-down milk to fake higher protein content on lab tests. By the time the scandal finally broke to the public in September 2008, the contamination had spread far beyond Sanlu to 22 different dairy producers, and eventually into products from major international brands that had unknowingly used contaminated Chinese milk. Nearly 300,000 children were sickened, tens of thousands hospitalized with kidney damage, and at least 6 infants died. The scandal triggered international recalls, criminal trials, and a wave of executions in China, including the man who supplied the tainted melamine powder. The former head of Sanlu was sentenced to life in prison. To this day, it remains one of the largest deliberate food contamination events in modern history. Not an accident, but a calculated decision made by dozens of people across an entire supply chain, all of whom chose profit over the infants drinking their product. If you like this video, subscribe for similar ones.